Every week, the Payne family cuts straight to the real financial story.
The one question, Bob, everyone's asking is, are we in an artificial intelligence bubble? You've been through boom and bust. What do you think?
No hype, no myths. Just what actually matters to your money.
Does feel very similar to what we experienced in the 90s. Where are we, though? Are we in 1995, 1997, 1999?
Listen to the Pain Points of Wealth on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Starting a business can seem like a daunting task, unless you have a partner like Shopify. They have the tools you need to start and grow your business. From designing a website to marketing to selling and beyond, Shopify can help with everything you need. There's a reason millions of companies like Mattel, Heinz, and Allbirds continue to trust and use them. With Shopify on your side, turn your big business idea into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
The left versus the right. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
It's Saturday night. Oh, no. It's Saturday afternoon.
Not quite night.
One of these Saturdays, James, Saturday Night Live is going to ask us to come down there.
Well, you do have a little bit of a history with Saturday Night Live,
yeah,
so
I do.
I guess that makes sense.
And you can get rid of some of these, what do they call themselves, comedians?
Right.
Anyway, I want to welcome all of you to the weekly session we have here between 3 and 4 with my favorite co-host, James Flippin. And James... on Thursday afternoon, there were some poll numbers that were not very favorable to the president. Now, for full disclosure, because I don't just take cheap shots and pretend that it's fact, the poll was commissioned by CNN. But they're saying that a poll they had done a couple months after he got in office, 66% of the people polled felt the country was moving in the right direction. And now it's down to something like 54%. And then also talking about the issue involving Greenland. It was almost 70% of the people don't want us to invade Greenland or try to take anything away from them. And the real question that they were deliberating on was how these numbers would affect the midterms. And you'll probably be pleased to hear what I'm about to say, which is I don't think they'll affect them at all.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I am appreciative of those comments. I think that it's probably true that whatever poll commissioned by CNN is not really going to have much of an impact on the midterm elections. But it doesn't necessarily surprise me either that an outlet like CNN, which is more or less committed itself to smearing Donald Trump on a daily basis, is going to continue to try to advance that narrative. I mean, we've seen throughout the last couple of weeks, for example, this effort to demonize President Trump when it comes to the immigration issue. And since we know that the border has been effectively closed, and I don't think there's any Americans on a real plurality basis are going to say that's a problem. So now they need to figure out a way to make that immigration issue into a problem. And so the ongoing efforts within the country with ICE and deportation, that's got to become the focus.
Now, James, you wouldn't be too affected by a little electric shock that I'm going to send your way.
Okay.
Are you ready?
And we got plenty of that going around the studio because it's cold and it's wintertime
exactly.
and the static electricity is building up. But go ahead.
So Thursday afternoon, before I came down to do the afternoon show with John and Rita,
Cats and Cause
and everybody else, they were showing the protesters in Minnesota again. And they were showing how a few of them were, dragged away and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I almost thought I was going to fall off my chair because the reporter who was partial to the demonstrators said, but the problem is that it seems like every time the demonstration is just, being an opportunity to say what they feel, that the demonstrators were standing in the way when the police were trying to take things out. And this reporter, whose name I don't remember, something like Delia or something like that, said, this cannot continue. If this continues, we're going to have a situation where a number of people are going to get hurt. And I thought for that kind of even-handed judgment, whatever her name is, I just have to say that if you were watching it, you could see it. You could see that things were getting more and more antagonistic. And it's very good to find out that it didn't come to fruition.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the reality behind the immigration debate right now is that there is no debate. There is no actual discussion that's going on. I was having a conversation with somebody here at the station the other day, somebody who kind of tends to be a little bit more left of center, and this was not on the air, but in the hallway. And this individual was saying, well, you know, I'm just concerned about the standards that go into ICE training and how they hire people and how much they're vetting people or not vetting people. And there needs to be more scrutiny placed on that kind of thing. And I said, you know what? If that was the discussion point, if that was the kind of thing that we were actually debating or discussing, and if there were people down at the immigration building in Washington, D.C., rallying outside and saying there needs to be more standards, we need to be more strict in how we hire people and the training and all that, you'd actually probably find some people on the political right who could at least be sympathetic to that. All right, we need more resources for training, for proper recruiting, and we want the best of the best, and we're worried about cops going beyond their mandate as federal agents and stuff like that. We can have some sympathy there because we've seen what happened with the FBI and some of the weaponization of that particular agency. So we can be sympathetic to that. But what's happening right now is nothing quite that nuanced. It's this whole discussion saying ICE can't operate here. Get out, ICE. Minnesota, Illinois, California, Oregon, you can't operate here. We operate outside of federal immigration law. And that's obviously not the same as we need better training, we need better recruitment, we need different standards.
You know, what's also disappointing is that a number of elected officials from these same places are taking those positions. And it was starting to sound like a familiar tone right here in New York City 5 or 6 years ago when the chant was defund the police.
Right.
It is that same kind of thing. And that's really, and I'd like to get your feeling about this, James, because usually I was in the situation where we were called on to do the right thing or, asked not to be too angry and inflammatory. But I really do think that some of my brethren, that I worked with and that kind of thing, have really not shown a real respect, because actually the fact that people do want to protest, the fact that they want to challenge some of the policies that the government is taking, that's not what's killing the society. I think what's killing the society is the intensity and at times the vulgarity that comes with the protest that would make the common man or woman who walked by walk faster so that they could get away from them.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this, for example, the death of Renee Good, the 37-year-old woman who was shot as she drove her car at a federal agent in Minneapolis. Tragic incident, right? Life cut short, mother, wife, all this stuff. Obviously, that's a senseless death in many ways. But it's not having the intended effect amongst the fake news and amongst the political agitators, because most people are saying, what was this woman doing driving down the middle of the street on a Monday afternoon or Tuesday afternoon? I guess it was Wednesday. Didn't she have something to do? Wasn't there something better that she could have been doing with her life? And more, we're learning about how these efforts are being coordinated by well-funded people and groups. So there's the ICE Watch thing, this sort of maybe George Soros linked type effort to disrupt ICE operations. That is not going to have the same groundswell of support as what happened following the death of George Floyd, for example, where people saw the video and they thought, oh, wow, these years of systemic abuses at the hands of cops, it's coming to a head. This is an opportunity for us to push for change, all that. It was also amid COVID, so a lot of people were excited to get out of their house. Totally different environment.
And you're right, James, because some of my friends who were, pretty conservative, they were mortified by what happened. And it was, and it was basically televised, and you hear this man trying to indicate to the officer that he can't breathe, and the officer's not paying attention to what he said. And, I think even people who would strongly disagree with a lot of, what went on there later on, but would admit that this was just not a great moment for the country to see that.
Yeah, I mean, I also think that the George Floyd situation has a connection to what's going on right now, because the George Floyd situation, obviously it had that cell phone video, the dramatic shot with Chauvin, and he's leaning on Floyd. That story was not properly reported or investigated or discovered, or whatever term you want to use, because it turns out that Floyd, based off the toxicology, had so much opiate in his system that that's what killed him, really, was the amount of drugs that he had taken. But in the current environment, what we're hearing about are all these people that are being deported, and the claim is that they're just well-meaning people who have lived here for decades, and they've worked as landscapers and cleaning ladies and janitors and doormen, and these are just people who have made lives for themselves here in the United States. They're getting deported. That's not true. Those are not the people that are being deported. If you look at the actual reporting surrounding the people getting kicked out in these ICE operations, they're gang members, they're drug dealers, they're human traffickers, they're rapists, they're pedophiles, they're awful people, scum. That's barely who the ICE has time for to kick out. They barely have enough people and enough time in the day to kick those people out. But the story that's being told is that that's not the kind of person that's getting kicked out. That it's just the well-meaning, well-to-do, quiet individual who happened to live in a basement apartment somewhere in Queens, and they're getting dragged out, kicking and screaming, getting sent back to Venezuela. That is not true. That's actually not based on the facts. But that type of reporting gins up a lot of that outrage, where people say, whoa, wait a second. I know some families who came here under different circumstances, and they're the ones getting kicked out? No. But that's the story that's being told, and it's fueling a lot of these protests.
It absolutely is. And when we come back, we can talk about how those protests are affecting other activities around the country. We are on the left versus the right. He's James Flippin, and I'm David Paterson, at least up to now. And we're going to take a break and hear from our sponsors and be right back.
The left versus the right on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Every week, the Payne family cuts straight to the real financial story.
The one question, Bob, everyone's asking is, are we in an artificial intelligence bubble? You've been through boom and bust. What do you think?
No hype, no myths. Just what actually matters to your money.
Does feel very similar to what we experienced in the 90s. Where are we, though? Are we in 1995, 1997, 1999?
Listen to the Pain Points of Wealth on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Whether you bond over streaming binge-worthy videos, watching sports recaps, video gaming, or by unplugging altogether, the 2026 Lincoln Nautilus Hybrid helps keep you connected throughout your journey. Learn more at Lincoln.com. Available connectivity features and functionality vary by model. Package pricing, trials, and term lengths vary by model. Video streaming and games are only available while parked.
The left versus the right. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We're back on the left versus the right, and we've been talking about the protesting in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
No, wait a second, Governor Paterson. I don't want to totally interrupt the discussion we've been having here about the protests in Minneapolis and all that stuff. But on Saturday at 77 WABC, it's all about the music radio once we get to a certain part of the day. Not yet. But let's get a little interjection of some music radio, because earlier this week, we've been talking about it off the air, your band had a chance to play up in Albany ahead of Governor Hochul's State of the State address. So tell us about that.
Yes, well, there's a guy who owns a couple of restaurants up there, Todd Shapiro. I've known him a long time. He's from Long Island, and he has a very good relationship with both sides. And he, in the last few years, has started this little, party that he throws for everybody to make sure that everyone that goes to the State of the State is inebriated.
Well, that's the easiest way to get through those speeches,
exactly.
Governor Paterson.
So it was my honor to perform with them. The guys who I usually play with were split up. One of them was in Maine, and they were different places. So they found a local band to play, and the band was excellent.
And for those who don't know, by the way, you play guitar.
I play guitar,
but you also sing.
And I
you're a vocalist.
I've been told that I'm trying to sing.
You carry a tune.
I try to carry a tune, and actually, I could tell because when you're around musicians, they don't talk, but you can tell how they feel, and they didn't want me to play the guitar. So they'd say, you should really concentrate more on singing than playing. Mm-hmm. So that made me put the guitar down because I realized that was going to be an impediment for them. Now, what happened was that after the performance, my wife Mary said to me, "You sang beautifully.
Ooh.
You should just sing. You shouldn't even play guitar."
Put a focus. Like, yeah, you're going to be like, the lead singer of the Doors. You're going to be only focusing on the singing part of it.
Right.
You're going to be a front man.
Right, exactly. That was Jim Morrison.
Jim Morrison,
yeah.
Thank you.
So, getting back to more mundane things, it was interesting. Governor Hochul's State of the State address.
Yeah, I'm glad because I did just want to say, can we both agree also that State of the States are really just like a pointless, outdated, useless waste of time nowadays.
Basically,
I mean, like once upon a time, you needed to call all the state senators and the state assemblymen back and have a big showy explanation of your agenda, and maybe the reporters could come together and get some tips as to what you were going to focus on. But in 2026, it's enough. She does like the video every single time she's got a policy position. I'm going to talk about this in my State of the State. All right, well then we heard about it for 3 weeks already. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, James, now that you mention it, because I never thought about this before, I guess this is why all these sideshows spring up, because people would just be bored coming up there, having dinner, you get up and whoever the governor is, just talks about how great they are and that kind of thing.
The pomp and circumstance is kind of all there is to it anymore.
And what's making it possible that it can still happen is that there was still a really frenzied this conversation and action even right before the governor gave the State of the State address, and it was I think because people had had a chance to break bread and hang out and have a drink with their political adversaries, and so it's a good thing. But when she gave the State of the State address, I thought that in many ways they just took all of the achievements from the last 4.5 years or whatever it's been, and they just got to a point where they weren't like it wasn't anything really new,
right?
Like you knew everything that was going on.
Yeah.
But what was different, James, is that the governor, I've always felt, and this isn't a comment about what kind of person she is, but when she's speaking, I feel frustration or anger.
Oh, good. Yes, so do I.
Or
maybe not for the same reason.
Shortness,
okay.
That kind of thing. But here, she would talk for a while and then kind of step back and almost make fun of herself and that kind of thing. So just for the performance part of the equation, I had to give her an A because I thought she did really an excellent job.
Yeah, I think she's okay at public speaking most of the time. I mean, I've never really come away thinking like, wow, what a commanding leader. But at the same time, I think that it's fair to note that she's obviously got her skill set when it comes to being a politician. The one thing I'll say as far as her State of the State address, rather than really getting into a whole lot of different political points, the universal childcare idea is a disaster for New York State. I mean, just in many, many, many ways. First of all, you have this being laid out as a pilot program, but if you take it beyond that and really actually offer everybody within the state of New York free childcare for their kids under age 3, so I guess 2 and up, you're talking about a major deficit for New York State. Like, we already are broke as a state, and we can't afford to add on universal childcare. It's, I think, Governor Hochul trying to keep pace with the farthest left elements of the Democrat Party, where a guy like Zohran Mamdani, as New York City mayor, he advanced this idea that New York City should have universal childcare. So Hochul, feeling the need to protect from the left flank, is saying, yeah, sure, we're going to bring it to New York as well. Whether or not it actually comes to fruition under her watch, that remains to be seen. But unfortunately, that's something we've seen from these New York left politicians for a long time now, continuing to kick the can down the road, keeping up some sort of a progressive front when it comes to the new policy, the new pursuit. But the price tag is going to come due years after they're out of office. And that's not responsible governing.
Well, James, now I think we can flip the chessboard around a little bit and realize that probably the reason that she went so far with the universal child care is that, at least to this point, she's not interested in raising taxes. Now, maybe she will be down the road. Maybe she's interested in doing it right now, but she's not going to do it right now.
Right. She knows it's a political loser.
And it's it would be quite controversial. But when they interviewed Mayor Mamdani right after the State of the State message, the first thing he said was, "Well, I'm still looking forward to us raising taxes on the millionaires who have plenty of money," and the whole advocacy for raising taxes.
Right.
And I think that might have been her way of trying not to offend him, but at the same time making it clear. I don't think raising taxes, Governor Hochul being from Buffalo and everything that has gone on in Buffalo and other places, I don't think that's her cup of tea. She may have to drink it, but I don't think that's who she is.
Well, I think that I don't really, and I don't even really necessarily mean this in a super mean way, but I don't even really know what she is. I think that Governor Hochul more or less exists to be a fundraising entity and to try to keep herself in office. And I don't really think that she has a super strong position on any of these political, she never really had a serious rise as a campaigning candidate. She was kind of attached to Andrew Cuomo, got elected because of that. Then she becomes the de facto governor when he stepped down.
I remember this type of process.
Yeah, you do. But I'll just say this. That she never really had to make her bones as a politician in that respect. She's a woman who, was a member of Congress, I guess, and has come of age with the whole, Buffalo upbringing and all this. And she's obviously got a very wealthy husband, and they helped raise some money to build a new stadium for the Bills and all this. I mean, I don't really know what she really stands for other than being a politician. And so she is doing anything she can right now to fight off the leftist flank from her party because, she's pretty much more of a centrist, I guess. And she's trying to navigate all this. But I think that what's interesting about some of the stuff we're talking about is this whole concept of whether or not we should raise taxes. And you're saying Governor Hochul probably doesn't want to. I think that's true because she knows that would be a hard sell politically. But I'd love to ask somebody
in this election year.
Right, exactly. I'd love to ask somebody like Kathy Hochul or Zohran Mamdani, the mayor, or any of these left-leaning politicians, why should people be willing to pay more taxes? Like, not, you think it's fair or you think it's this or you think it's that. Why? The mass transit stinks. The weather stinks 2/3 of the year. Wall Street's leaving. The internet has changed everything. The job market is shrinking. The housing market is continuing to just go higher and higher. And yet on the low end, it's worse and worse because of rent stabilization. So why? Why should anybody stay? Why shouldn't I go to Florida? Why shouldn't I go to South Carolina? Make your case for, New York's the greatest city in the world, Yeah, it got that way because it fostered ingenuity, stick-to-itiveness, hard work, entrepreneurship, the ability to take a buck and turn it into 10, the arts and culture and all the things that thrived in the gaps between that life. That's what makes New York City amazing. That's what makes New York as a state attractive. But if you're going to continuously hit at all this other stuff and then ask for people to pay more money, what's the upside? What's the selling point for saying that people should actually be willing to pay more for the high cost of living that is being in New York already? I'd love to hear them actually make that case.
I think if she were with us, she would talk about the family of New York, and family members are in trouble. Others need to help them. And I think that is the message for raising taxes, that, that these people, they make a lot of money. They complain whenever the taxes go up, but you don't see them losing their homes or anything like that. And I think that conversation has come up a lot in Albany. When I was governor, and I really looked at everything and tried to be fair, because when you're elected, it's kind of hard to describe, James, but it's when you look in the mirror, you wonder who you're looking at now. Like, okay, I've got this job. I never dreamed I'd ever have it. And I think in looking at all the possibilities, I became less interested in raising taxes. That also allowed my colleagues to be less interested in seeing me come back for another term. But when I look back now, going on 16 years after that happened, I'm glad I did that, because and I'm not the only one who did, by the way. But you just can't always have an out, which is that, oh, you know what? That bridge blew up. Well, let's raise some taxes. We'll build another one. And I think that a lot of people get tired of that after a while. Now, there are conditions that a state or a municipality might need extra money, and they tax the people there. But usually, once you impose a tax, you're stuck with it forever.
Yeah, I mean, that looks like it's going to be the case for something like a congestion pricing, which was just an arbitrary tax that was placed on the motorists in New York City, largely because the powers that be, whether it's the NYPD, the mayor's office, the MTA, all decided that it's okay that a group of people just outright refuse to pay for the subway and outright refuse to pay for the bus. That was accepted. That was said to be fine. So someone had to be punished for that.
Right.
There's a action reaction in everything in life. So now, if you're not going to enforce the need to actually pay for your ride, somebody else is going to pay. And it ain't Jano Lieber, because he never decided that he was going to willfully cut his salary from $400,000 a year. He's just going to decide to say, oh, all these people that drive into New York City, we just invented a magic air tax that you have to pay for driving on public roads. So that's what happened. That tax is probably never going to go away. And that's my point. The cost of living just continues to go up, and I have yet to see any argument made for how the commensurate living experience, the standard of living, has actually increased. So that's, again, just to belabor the point. You tell me, Zohran Mamdani, you tell me, Kathy Hochul, why people should be willing to pay higher taxes. You made the point, Governor Paterson, in some sort of maybe appealing to altruism and people's better nature, that it's because there are people who need help. Okay, that might be the case. But we've also got all this widespread fraud throughout the country. And there's some people like Scott Bessent who basically say 10% of these entitlement programs go toward fraud. So why don't you cut that 10%, put that towards the trappings of government, and stop hitting us up for all the money? That'd be nice.
Elon Musk said if you have a $7 trillion budget, you're going to have a $700 billion of the $7 trillion will wind up in the hands of fraudsters.
Right. And there's always probably going to be some element of fraud. It's just like anything. I mean, my dad loves to tell the story of when my mom and dad went to Israel, and they went to a winery there, like a thousands-year-old winery, and they had on the ledgers there, written in whatever it was, either Hebrew, Aramaic, whatever, the amount that you're allowing for people who walk off the job with a couple bottles each week. So and so leaves with another couple bottles of extra wine, bring it home to the family. That's okay. We're accounting for that. So you're going to always have some amount of theft and loss and property destruction and things that you have to factor into on the accounting side. But 10%? $780 billion on its $7 trillion. I mean, like you're saying, that's significant.
That is significant. And what's also significant is that we want to pause for a word from our sponsors. And when we come back, I think we'll stay on the New York State point, but we'll move from the situation of governance to the situation of campaigning. So
yes.
Get ready, James.
And also, something that we've had a chance to do in past shows, Governor Paterson, is take a quick look at the New York sports scene right before we leave for the day, since we're both sports fans. This one, not a terrible week. I mean, kind of a mixed bag, but not a terrible week for the New York sports fans. So we could talk about that a little bit, too.
We'll be right back.
The left versus the right on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The left versus the right. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Well, we are flying through this Saturday afternoon with all the discussions of how the state of the state went and what the Governor Hochul's policies are, and actually what the frequently debated policies in the state are themselves. But all around that, James, is a campaign, and there's a gentleman that happens to live in Long Island who I've known for a long time named Bruce Blakeman, and I don't think he can beat Governor Hochul, but he's got a tremendous spirit about him, and even when Elise Stefanik was still in the race, I know people that he knows, and so in those conversations that you see them from time to time, he really was sure that he would win that primary, and now by the looks of things, he would have.
Well, I mean, I think that the interesting thing with the governor's race is kind of some of the stuff that we've talked about here, that it's not that well defined what the issues are that Hochul and Blakeman are going to kind of run up against each other on, right? I think Hochul is trying her best to come off as someone who, yes, she's a Democrat, yes, she kind of bends toward the progressive cause, but believes in being more centrist, believes in being more pro-business or whatever, the amount of kind of anti-capitalist rhetoric that you typically get from the Democratic Socialists and all that. Not as much the talking point of a Kathy Hochul, who has done her best to kind of cozy up to some of the business community, including the fact that she's maintained a pretty good relationship with our owner-operator, John Catsimatidis, as a matter of fact. So I think that Blakeman, and I had a chance to catch up with him this week at the station, Governor, he is going to try to really dig in on the law and order side. And he's going to want to make a focus how Kathy Hochul is connected to the Cuomo administration, the bail reform, raise the age, the ongoing debate over ICE is going to be something that he'll want to dig in on. Kathy Hochul this week passing or trying to advance legislation that would make it easier for New Yorkers to sue members of ICE, for example, if their rights are violated. So I would imagine that it's going to be a lot of focus on those issues. And because that's such a hot button issue right now, it could almost be one of those races that continues to draw national attention and be running sort of right in lockstep with a lot of the stuff that's talked about for the midterms. And
I don't blame either one of them for how they appear to be campaigning to this point, because I think the governor knows that she's got to open herself up a little more and hear the voices of people. Now, she does have the advantage that, she grew up in upstate New York, and there's a, kind of profound feeling that people from that area have, that Erie County area. But Bruce Blakeman, in his experiences, has been in a similar situation, particularly, in Garden City and Rockville Center,
right,
and Valley Stream,
yeah,
and Northport and all these other places where what he has to say will be heard.
Yeah, and I think that the stuff that I heard about when it was still kind of the who will be the person that shakes out here on the Republican side, Elise Stefanik or Bruce Blakeman, I recall at the time hosting some morning show fill-ins for Sid when he was off, and John and I had a chance to catch up with Todd Shapiro, who we talked about earlier in the show. And Todd, in his capacity as a PR consultant, was saying he thinks that you really need that base of support from a place like Long Island, which tends to bend a little bit more to the right than, say, New York City does. But You're still within that downstate population, community, ecosystem, whatever term you want to use. You're still generating that base of support from the downstate region, where the whole idea for me with an Elise Stefanik was, okay, upstate New York being a bit more conservative, that's where your base of support is going to come from with a Stefanik, and maybe that kind of cuts into that home field advantage that Hochul has up there. But yeah, I think that the attractive aspect of a Blakeman is that he's somewhat of a known entity within the extended New York City area, and maybe that blunts some of the natural inherent advantage where you assume that Hochul is going to get, 80 to 90% of the people in New York City proper. So, I mean, maybe that's too high of a number, but it's certainly an uphill battle when you consider how many people live in this area.
I think also that with Blakeman, he had been trying for a long time to win one of these positions. This is, kind of a dream that he's had for, a good portion of his public life. And now that what I've noticed about him is that now that he became the Republican candidate, now that no one's challenging him in a primary, now that he's got an opportunity to go around the state and speak to people, wherever he goes, that he will be a factor in this race. I like that little voice inside of you still tells me that Hochul's going to win, but
just based off the electorate math, you mean?
Yeah, just that, and just basically where New Yorkers are about a lot of things, and but this will be a contested race. This will certainly be a situation where I think we will actually see the best voices of two very accomplished people, and I'm looking forward to it. Now, I think Hochul struck the first blow when she talked about the shooting in Minneapolis. She said that the ICE people shouldn't even have been there, and that will attract a reaction. But at the same time, the reaction is what Hochul would want, that she's standing alone against, everybody who knew that there needed to be protection from the large number of people who were protesting. And in that regard, that will be a point for her. Blakeman's point, I think, will be more about public safety, as you said before.
Yeah, and I hope that Bruce Blakeman, if he happens to hear this and wants to take some back of the napkin armchair advice from somebody who really doesn't know what they're talking about, would put focus on
me, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. Put focus on the fact that Kathy Hochul and all the Democrats continue to support the idea of sanctuary state. Just hammer that home, because what that means is a politician who supports insurrection, who supports chaos, who supports civil war, who supports fighting between the federal government and the state. And that is completely antithetical to the concept of the Republican democracy that we have in this country, to the extent where we have a country known as the USA. People in the political ranks like to pretend that they love it. They put the little lapel pin of the flag on their jacket. And yet at the same time, they want to tell us that the law that exists concerning citizenship and the border around the United States and how these 50 states make up a broader union, they want to pick and choose what they have to focus on and what they actually have to follow. And Kathy Hochul has the gumption, has the gall to say that these ICE agents shouldn't be operating in Minneapolis. Says who, Kathy? Why? Because you think that rapists and pedophiles and drug dealers should be able to operate unencumbered just because they happen to have been born in El Salvador or Nicaragua or Venezuela or Colombia? Because they were born outside of the country, they're completely free to operate outside of the laws that we have when it comes to prostitution, drug dealing, rape, violence. That's all fine because they're from another country. Oh, I see. That's her position. So if Blakeman's smart, and what's going to happen over the coming months is that there's going to be more and more of this chaos in places like Chicago and Minneapolis and LA and Portland, probably New York as well. He should say, if cops were empowered to allow people to protest peacefully, but also allow these federal agents to do their job, we wouldn't have all this chaos. But a woman like Kathy Hochul believes in the concept of sanctuary state, and that's why we have all this chaos.
I guess she does because she basically said it.
None of them were willing to denounce it. I gave Eric Adams a million chances. I remember emailing Fabian Levy 25 times. Hey, are you willing to talk about how the sanctuary city, oops, not a good idea. Not a good idea. Maybe it was well intended, but not a good idea. Are you willing to say it? Are you willing to say it? They never did. They never did. So the politicians on the left are backed into a corner with this whole concept of so-called sanctuary city. People think it's a really innocuous position. It's anything but. It's pure chaos. It's the reason Renee Good died. So that's what Bruce Blakeman should be focusing on.
And one of just when we think about just the whole concept, the sanctuary to me is the fact that they're in this country. That's the sanctuary.
Yeah.
And the Fifth Amendment, the First Amendment, the 14th Amendment, all of these protections give you that right, as long as you're not trying to harm somebody, of freedom of speech. Now, when this concept is now connected to different cities, it's as if we're dividing up the whole country.
Bingo.
Because then every city is going to have a label, sanctuary city, that kind of thing.
And again, what are you offering sanctuary from? Is the idea that these people are somehow being subjugated or so grossly mistreated in their home country that they need the right to come here and seek that temporary protected status or asylum or whatever? Then make that case and connect it to that particular person and the country from which they're coming. And then we can have a debate. It's the same thing as I had that discussion in the hallway with somebody who said, well, the training standards for ICE are not high enough and they'll hire anybody. Okay, then talk about that. Not the idea of a Kathy Hochul saying they had no right to be there. Yes, they did, Kathy, because last I checked, Minnesota, New York, California, Portland, just because they have a Democrat in the state house doesn't mean they're not part of the United States of America.
And that's a good question that you asked, James, because there really is what the sanctuary or any sanctuary is supposed to provide is protection for the individual against some outside force that's trying to hurt them. So you have sanctuaries for battered women. You have sanctuaries for children who are abused. Mm-hmm. You've had sanctuaries for people who are very ill and their illness could affect others. So
right.
You give them a sanctuary from.
Yeah. Or, I mean, sometimes political dissidents, right? If somebody's being persecuted for their beliefs or just because they said something that's not politically popular, but they're actually not directly harming anyone by saying it. There's been instances where a church or some other institution wants to offer that person sanctuary. We even saw Ed Snowden getting that sanctuary from one of the embassies in the UK or whatever. So Julian Assange, people getting sanctuary. Individuals get sanctuary. The entire city doesn't just get told, oh, we don't operate anymore with the understanding that federal law exists.
And also the question that that keeps coming up is that whether we like it or not, the federal government supersedes in these instances.
Yeah.
That they can come in. And, I understand the feelings of a lot of the protesters, like more than you would think. But the thing that I can't get around is the fact that 60 years ago, when I was, a kid, the southern states were blocking integration. Mm-hmm. They were supporting segregation. They were threatening and killing the civil rights workers.
They basically decided that they were a sanctuary state or city from the idea of the civil rights movement.
Right, exactly. And inevitably...
Nobody accepted that, though, did they? I mean, the national news certainly didn't, and the federal government didn't.
You know what's interesting, James, just in remembering that period of time, when finally, the Brown versus the Board of Education, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, all these other activities, and I think the Southerners realized, this type of fight is lost. They adjusted to integration much better than a lot of the northern cities because they knew the people. In other words, they knew the black people that lived in their town. They just didn't let them eat in the restaurants. But when they now had to let them eat in the restaurants, it probably took not such a long period of time that they cleaved together as members of whatever that city or town was.
Yeah, it's a fascinating cultural phenomenon that you're talking about. I've heard a lot of people talk about this in the sense that the antebellum South, or whatever term you want to use, the period kind of running up to the Civil War and even the period after that, had a lot of this use of race and class to sort of divide people who weren't necessarily well off, right? You had the poor whites and the poor blacks who were somehow at odds with each other strictly over the concept of race. Whereas in the North and some of these more integrated communities that didn't have those same statute-based areas of discrimination, it kind of just happened more along the lines of culture. And, well, these types of people live here and these types of people live there. I think it was Willie Mays who said that he never experienced kind of discrimination and race-based hatred as he did in the North when he was in Alabama or in the South. Like, it was just a totally different concept. And that's what I find kind of fascinating when you talk about things like sociology, politics, culture. Right now, the groups of people that are most vociferously standing up against, arguing about, protesting against these, say, ICE enforcement efforts are white people. Well-to-do white people, and a lot of them are women, by the way. So they're finding a way to make themselves feel virtuous or important or really good people by saying, oh, leave those people alone. Oh, don't you do. Meanwhile, as I said, who are these people that you're telling them not to leave alone? Gang members, drug dealers, violent people, rapists. I mean, these are the scum of the earth that you should not be defending in any way, shape, or form, whether they're illegal or legal.
And Martin Luther King wrote a couple of books, and in one of them, he talked about that he's not just resisting the pressure from racists and the Ku Klux Klan and that kind of thing, but he's also getting it from the socialists who want him to do everything their way.
Right.
And then he'd wind up reporting to them, and he wasn't going to have it. He wasn't going to let that happen. And really, for a brief period after his assassination, they were starting to make some inroads into the civil rights movement, because I think the whole movement was so built around King that it was hard for a successor to step in the next day.
Yeah.
But after a while, I think the leaders recognized that they were being used. There's
and shout to Martin Luther King Jr., by the way, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., as obviously on Monday we celebrate his legacy with the holiday itself. But yeah, the anti-violence movement, right? I mean, he realized through studying Mahatma Gandhi that you really had more power behind your message if you more or less said, I'm so righteous in this pursuit, I don't even need to take up arms. I don't even need to set fires. I don't even need to break windows. I'm just going to stand here and force you to look at what it is you're doing. That's my point. If you went down to the ICE building in Washington, D.C., and everybody was standing there and saying, we demand better training, we demand better hiring practices, there's some level of the populace that's going to find that sympathetic. But when you're out there calling on agents to more or less have to tear gas you because you're being a violent mob, because you just don't want federal immigration law to be enforced, you're not going to win a lot of brownie points that way.
Yeah. And by the way, since it is the weekend that will culminate with the celebration of Dr. King's contribution to our society, his birthday actually being January 15th, but this year the 3-day weekend will end on the 19th. There are a lot of stories about him, James, but my favorite one is that before the March on Washington, a lot of the other ministers who were coming to the march, they were part of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and then ministers from all over the country felt that King was appealing too much to the greater white communities, that, we're all the same, we're all God's children and that kind of thing. And they wanted to talk about the specific ways that a lot of these opponents were not did not feel people were the same and were still pushing for segregation and that kind of thing. And so finally, they said to him, if you don't agree not to tell that little story that you always talk about, how we're all the same and we should treat each other equally, we're not coming to the march. And King's response to them was, then I guess it'll be a smaller march. Isn't that great?
It really is, Governor Paterson, because I find that, and I imagine that if you really got down to brass tacks, an issue that you and I could really passionately agree on, even though a lot of the time, even though it's the left versus the right, we find a lot of common ground. One of the things that I think we would definitely agree on is that ethos, that idea that everybody is equal in the eyes of God, or however it is you see it in your world. Everybody's equal. Everybody's deserving of merit and protection and love and support. And because of that, we're in this together. And yet the idea from the prevailing leftist mindset is, no, we're very, very different. Black people have this way of looking at things and white people are this way. And if you're Indian and if you're a woman or if you're a man or if you're gay or if you're straight, everybody's different. Well, sure, we've got some differences, but we're all the same at the core. And that's what I think was so appealing about that message that really took off in the 60s. And then the left said, well, but how are we going to sell books now?
Yes.
Well, but how are we going to get professorships now? How am I going to make money off this now? We got to keep the divide going. We got to get it. We got to keep it divided. So, yeah, unfortunately, the legacy of Dr. King is one that we lift up, but not everybody does.
By the way, James, there's a person who works at this station who some years ago, I believe, was coming out of Penn Station. And he starts walking down 34th Street. And this woman going the other way stops him and says, sir, do you think that we're all related? And he says, what do you mean we're all related? That we basically came from the same place. We're all related to each other. And he said, yeah, I think so. And she said, well, then, cousin, give me $1 so I can get on the train. And it was Cousin Brucey. That's where he got the name Cousin from. How do you like that?
Very cool. I like that a lot, actually. Yeah, I really appreciate that. I know we're almost out of time here, Governor Paterson, but I just want to say shout to the people of Iran. They're absolutely inspiring. I can't even imagine the kind of guts and guile it takes to be willing to go out onto the streets when your friends and family members are being gunned down by security forces. It's absolutely tragic, but it's absolutely inspiring what's going on over there. I know no one on college campuses or the greater political left is going to actually be willing to say that, but I will, and rock on.
And James, if that's how you feel, then that's how I feel. No, but no, very seriously. It's a serious situation. We just hope that we're building a presence there. Our president said that there were 800 executions that were postponed or not taken. Mm-hmm. I hope that's accurate, and I hope that we can work something out. And I think our partners in Israel want to help us do that.
Yep. And also Kyle Tucker, go screw.
Yeah, Kyle Tucker.
Bo Bichette, bring it on, baby. Let's do it. Down with the Dodgers.
Well, thank you all for listening. We happy to join you from 3 to 4 on the left versus the right. Today, it's more like the left and right together. So it's a left and a right, and now it's
the whole spectrum.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to The Left versus the Right. You can hear The Left versus the Right Saturday afternoons at 4. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?
Every week, the Payne family cuts straight to the real financial story.
The one question, Bob, everyone's asking is, are we in an artificial intelligence bubble? You've been through boom and bust. What do you think?
No hype, no myths. Just what actually matters to your money.
Does feel very similar to what we experienced in the 90s. Where are we, though? Are we in 1995, 1997, 1999?
Listen to the Pain Points of Wealth on the Red Apple Podcast Network.